The NBA draft is over and we are on our way toward free agency. 3 key questions that will guide the rest of the offseason for the Phoenix Suns coming up on today's episode of Locked On Suns.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 5 seasons and a writer at Suns.com and Dime Magazine. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen today and every day. If you're finding us on your favorite podcast platform, go ahead and hit follow or subscribe. Make sure we show up in your feed every day. If you are finding us on YouTube, that's the best way to support the show. Go ahead and hit subscribe down below and drop me a comment answering all 3 of these questions, answering one of these questions that we're going to hit on today. There is no shortage of Suns news to talk about. I'm actually going to borrow a question from a YouTube comment here today with Aaron Edwards. He is joining me as he does every week, a writer at All Caps NBA. And Aaron, I want to start with the draft. That's where we're leaving off here. It's kind of weird how quickly things just turn right around in the NBA. It's like, the offseason stuff, free agency stuff sort of starts, then you go right into the draft, but then the free agency stuff never really goes away. The NBA has figured this out to a science. But my question number 1 for you here is, I put it this way in last night's show, which is I was at about a 25%, maybe 30% chance that the Suns kept Deandre Ayton heading into the week. And based on what's happened with the teams that might have wanted to get him and what happened in the draft and the comments from James Jones, I might be at least 33%, maybe 35, 40% that they keep him now. What would you put your percentage confidence that Ayton stays a Sun at as we stand on Friday afternoon?
I think I tweeted something after Detroit made the trade where I think I said something like Ayton might as well renew that lease because you're stuck here. And it just seemed like that. And unless we were hearing rumblings about Atlanta, that's probably like the last domino to drop. But it's looking like I would put it at like 40, 45 right now. Unless James Jones is really keeping something in his back pocket, I really don't see another scenario.
So a bunch of ripple questions from there. I have a few more. So with Monty, I trust him of all people to be able to fix this if there is any hard feelings. I think if you're picking any coach in the NBA who can figure it out with the dude that he might not get along with all that well, he's probably up there. And we've seen this before, right? Like, it wouldn't be unprecedented. There was there was that Pascal Siakam stuff a while ago where he reportedly cursed out Nick Nurse in the locker room, got suspended by the team for a game, and now they're not even looking to trade him anymore. And look, you can go anywhere in NBA history. I think it used to happen way more often, but I think Monty's the guy who can handle that. But we also heard the softball game media availability stuff this week too, which I didn't really talk about on the show. But all of those guys were kind of like, yeah, we still want him back. So I don't know. If you just compare that to what we saw with the after game, like what happened after game 7, which was nobody wanting to go out there and publicly say that they supported him and everybody distancing themselves, to now you have James Jones, you have players, everybody else, you have suitors running thin. It feels like the personality, the behind the scenes stuff is getting better too.
Yeah, I think they just needed to get further away from it. It seems like, especially a loss that bad. It was good just seeing them in the softball game stuff, just interact. It's saying that they do still know each other. Like, they were pretty tight knit during the season. And it just seemed like, I guess it just comes with the off season, but those guys just kind of just went their separate ways for the most part. And it's just good to see that they are still a team. And you can kind of tell that maybe they think that for the most part, they're going to be stuck with each other and running this back a little bit.
Again, yeah. It would be very strange. I do think there will be some changes, but I'm leaning, like I said, more toward the Ayton thing actually coming together. But that said, 2 teams that I haven't personally talked about very much, and I don't think we've talked about a lot. One, This would be one where I probably would still be on board with doing the trade. It sounds like the Pistons aren't even interested anymore.
Yeah.
The Spurs would be like the Suns taking a pretty considerable step back, I feel like, because people seem to think like San Antonio taking all those wings in the first round last night, that means that they're more suited for an Ayton trade. It's like, yeah, I guess if the Suns want to like retool a little bit, but they didn't get any closer to doing a deal that would actually help the Suns continue to compete for a championship. But the one team I think might be able to do that is Atlanta. What do you think of John Collins? Because he seems very, very available. He would sort of fill Ayton's spot. Like, he can play center for you. He can also play the 4, and he can score. I think he's a really good fit here, and I'm coming around on that option. What do you think?
Yeah, if we're just going to change the overall just how we play, because that's just a different offense in general. Like, it's not getting it inside and never getting it back out. John Collins can spread the floor a little bit more, and I don't think he's anywhere close to as good as Ayton, but I just think in terms of if we're willing to change the way we play, change the pace, Chris Paul's willing to change this, then that would be a really good fit because he's really athletic and he knows how to finish.
Okay, so when you say he's not anywhere near as good as Ayton, I guess you mean defense, right? Like, he's not going to be able to get that done for you. I think that's true, but I wonder if there's not a way, because I was talking to a Hawks guy, the guy who does Locked On Hawks for us, and he was talking about if you just look at like synergy play type data or any of that stuff that just shows like what is Collins actually doing as a pick and roll finisher, he's been like, you could make an argument he's been the best pick and roll scorer as a big man in the entire NBA for basically 2 straight seasons now. He hasn't been healthy, which is another factor here, but he's that good. Like, he will give Suns fans Amari Stoudemire vibes. Like, that's not even an exaggeration on offense. But defensively, I think you're right. But I wonder if there's not a version of it where Jay Crowder, who we heard the Suns were poking around on trades with, can you turn him into another forward center option? Can you maybe bring back JaVale on a minimum if he's getting to a point in his career where he's not as concerned with making a bunch of money as he gets closer to retirement? Maybe Bismack Biyombo comes back. Can you cobble together with Dario Saric, who James Jones specifically named in last night's press conference? I wonder if that can be cobbled together in a rotation where, yeah, you don't have Ayton playing 38, 40 minutes in a playoff game, but you have enough different options, and Collins just gives you that extra third option on offense that they've been missing, where the team, like you said, it looks a lot different, but could it be better? Is there a version where that ends up being a better team than what we've seen the past 2 years?
I'm not sure about better. Like, I think we still end up in the same position, sort of. Like, and he brought Rich and how we're keeping him, and I was just thinking, like, of roster spots. Like, we still haven't decided what we're doing with campaign. Like, we need a third scorer and a shot creator and a playmaker, and nothing's going to change until we figure that out, because the second Devin Booker sits down or anything happens to Paul, whether we ever find out or not, the offense and the team kind of just falls apart. So we do need that third person. I don't think another big that's athletic is going to fix that anyway.
Yeah, I don't know enough detailed about Collins' game to know if he's the type of guy that still has the upside to like create for himself, but he's only 24, like he's about to turn 25. I don't know. Like, by the end of Stoudemire's career, Nash always talks about like that 06-07 season and those later years that Amari just knew. He just understood what the defense was going to do in front of him in a way that he didn't when he was just catching lobs all the time in the first couple seasons they played together. And I wonder if, I'm not saying those are the same exact type of players, but I feel like that does come along for some of these guys where it's like, if you have the natural ability and they have to respect you from, I guess right now, sort of 2 levels, like he's an inside, he's a 3 guy, he's not so much a mid-range, but if he could get a face-up game, if he could get an attacking game off of the dribble when they do close out on those threes, I don't know. I think if like it's an optimistic outlook, but if Collins was able to come in and do some of that for you in the next couple of years, if Saric got healthy and actually looked like himself again, and then you just have some bigs like Biyombo, like McGee, or whatever the other version of that type of guy is, I think it could work. I think that they could maybe, the way Matt Moore put it earlier in the week was like, maybe they're a worse offense or a worse regular season team, but a better more versatile playoff team. I don't know. Last question for you here, though, on this Ayton topic. I'm not sure. This is the one I stole from the YouTube comment. What about the Grizzlies? Because they quietly have the potential to get some cap space. Now, cap space kind of doesn't matter, I guess, for all intents and purposes, if it would be a sign and trade. But they have some flexibility, is my point. And maybe there's a Steven Adams trade. Maybe there's a Dylan Brooks trade. I don't know if they necessarily have anything in terms of big salaries, but they also have all these young guys. I'm thinking more about it, at least. I hadn't really considered them, but they just have so much flexibility, and they obviously want the big man versatility there. I just think that, to me, it's like Jaren Jackson's probably their center long term. That's the one hang-up I have.
Yeah, Steven Adams and Dylan Brooks, I don't think that moves the needle at all. Especially, I don't even know what Steven Adams is anymore. I mean, he kind of attacked the Warriors when they went small, and that almost changed the series, but Ja got hurt. But I just think Steven Adams is Steven Adams. He's a really good rebounder, which was a really big problem for us last year. But Ayton would be a good rebounder if he just got help down there. I think that was just scheme-wise. Mikal Bridges and Crowder not helping. So I'm not sure. I like Dylan Brooks. Well, he takes some terrible shots sometimes, but I think that's just the vibe of that team. A lot of them take really bad shots. But sure. I think coming here would probably dial him back a little bit. I like that he's athletic and he's confident, but I'm not sure if that's the other scorer that we need either. But I do like his game for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel you. I think you're right to be focused on getting that other scorer in this deal. I just don't know if it's there. I don't know if there is.
I don't either.
So it's like, to me, and to be clear, it might be Adams and Brooks or just one of those guys. And then the real crown jewel would be, can you get one of their young guys? Can you get Zaire Williams? Can you get Brandon Clark? Something like that. Yeah. Xavier Tillman. Can you get one of those players? Probably Tillman being less desirable, but can you bring one of their younger players on and have them maybe develop into some version of that? I don't know if either one of those guys are ever going to be that go-to scorer, but I think they could fit with what the Suns want to do.
Yeah, I think
it would just make you look a little different. It would probably be more like that Spurs deal, though, where you're getting a little bit worse in the short term and using it to kind of retool a little bit.
Yeah, we're such in need of a third scorer. Cam Reddish came up and my ears perked up. My brain keeps telling me Chris Paul is 37 and we play 80-something games next year. It's just the math just doesn't add up for me right now. So I just know we need to fix that problem.
I think that the trash truck outside my window is indicating that Memphis offer would be garbage. So we can move on to one guy who probably wouldn't be the third scorer, but the first scorer on this team. I think you know what I'm talking about. Brooklyn, yep. KD, we'll get into all of it. First, guys, today's show brought to you by the one and only NBA Jam, which is back courtesy of Arcade 1-Up, the leader in at-home retro arcade games. Not only bringing the best game ever back, not only bringing it back in arcade form, not console form or playing it on a little handheld, but the legitimate full arcade version. But they're making it bigger and better than ever with a Shaq edition. That's right, a Shaquille O'Neal NBA Jam special limited edition. A giveaway courtesy of Arcade 1-Up. Jump clear across the court and set the ball on fire in one of the first sports games ever to feature real and digitized NBA licensed teams. No fouls, no free throws, no quarters required. Compete with friends and family through all new Wi-Fi leaderboards, making you more connected than ever. Pre-order now from arcade1up.com. That's up.com for an estimated early September ship date if you want to make the purchase, starting at $399. But again, we are giving away a version of this NBA Jam Shaq edition to a one lucky Locked On listener. Enter for a chance to win at arcade1up.com/lockedon. Perfect for a man cave, perfect for your dining room. I don't care. It's perfect anywhere. That's up.com/lockedon. You've got until July 8th to enter to win the NBA Jam Shaq Edition console. Don't miss out. Enter today. All right, let's not close things out. We have a lot to get to. Kevin Durant is next up on our docket. We're going to talk about the front office stuff as well, the kind of Kevin Arnovitz story, which I touched on for about 10 minutes yesterday. I'm going to get Aaron's thoughts, but we have to hit the Kevin Durant stuff first. So Kyrie Irving reportedly on the move, potentially. Acrimonious was the word that got thrown out there by Woj today. It doesn't seem like it's going well. If it's already getting to that point publicly, and Woj, our guy Woj, is telling us less and less these days, it's definitely it's moving in the wrong direction. So that obviously raises questions about Kevin Durant. Does he want to stay there and play with Ben Simmons and Seth Curry for a few more years, or does he want to continue to win? And then, of course, the next question is, where does he go if he does indeed leave? So with that, I have the question, this pressing question regarding Kevin Durant from a Suns perspective is, would you make Mikal Bridges untouchable in a trade like this? Because let's just jump all the way to the future. Let's say it's a week from now. This is very real. Kevin Durant makes it known that he's willing to be traded. He makes it known that the Suns are one of the teams he would like to play for. This is the question that you're inevitably going to have to ask yourself if you're James Jones. Is Mikal Bridges untouchable in a Kevin Durant trade? What do you say?
You got to say no. And I was listening to the post, and Bobby Marks said that if KD wanted to come here, they're probably going to ask for Ayton and Bridges, and you got to do it. I don't know if I think the price of not doing it is way more than the price of doing it. I just think Suns fans would never forgive this place if KD is on the table. And once again, a 37-year-old Chris Paul who will play though. Like, he's going to have a point guard that's willing to play the game of basketball. And I think that is even a pretty good sell for him at this point. And Booker, who he just sings about whenever you put a mic in front of his face. So I just think those three, and you can figure out the other stuff later, which is what every team did when they got KD. I mean, other than the Warriors, obviously. But I just think you get the three pieces that you need, and then you figure it out from there.
Yeah, I just can't help but feel like the thing that I say that makes me, the thing that I think about that makes me feel like I might say no is that Bridges shouldn't go, that he is untouchable, is that feels to me like exactly the guy that we've seen get put into these trades and then the team just regrets it immediately, right? Like,
yeah,
that's the guy. It's the guy where they go the other direction in a trade, and then you're like, man, it would be perfect if they still had that guy, right? Like, even with the what was the trade? Oh, it was the other direction, but it was Philly not having Seth Curry anymore. It was like they could use a player exactly like Seth Curry. I'm not saying he's as good as Mikal Bridges, but Bridges is just that perfect glue piece. But yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, how much leverage do we think that the Nets would have at that point? Because I feel like we always come into this stuff with like, oh, it's gonna take everything. And outside of Anthony Davis, it feels like it's always less than we think. Like with Harden to the Nets in the first place, it was like crappy picks and some salary filler types of players. It was Victor Oladipo and whatnot. Like, I don't know. I think where our heads are at right now is like, yeah, it's going to take the most legendary trade of all time. And then you're like, okay, well, KD's in his mid-30s. He has 4 years left on his deal. The Nets have nothing else to do but to listen to what he wants, really, because they need something back for him. And I don't know. I'm not sure that the Nets could actually negotiate into a position to get Bridges either. So I think the Suns holding out wouldn't necessarily nix the whole thing.
Yeah, I think if they do ask for Bridges, I think the Suns would say yes. I think that they would probably try to ask a little bit more, like a couple first. And I think that's kind of where James Jones might draw the line future-wise. But at the same time, I think the Nets will, if you say the name KD and you're willing to trade him, I think the Nets can find a sucker somewhere. Like, I just think the name KD, like, holds a lot of weight. And dudes like that really don't get traded, like a top 10 all-time player. And I just think the second you mention his name, a sucker's going to show their face and be like, I'll give you what you want. Like, what do I have to give you for KD? Even if it's not the Suns. If the Suns draw the line, somebody's not going to draw a line for a trade like KD.
So just to play the game a little bit then, we think – so the team then is – it's – for all intents and purposes, I'm not going to throw out like Landry Shamet still being around or whatever, but like the team is Booker, Paul – Cam Johnson, and Kevin Durant. Like, that's your four.
Yes.
Maybe Jay Crowder. I don't know. Maybe he has to go for salary. I'm not sure exactly what the deal would look like. It sounds like it could. I mean, it could also be a 3-team thing. So it gets complicated. But, like, that's what you're going to battle with. So.
Well, Chris Paul.
Yeah, Chris Paul.
Yeah.
Yes. So is that. we just watched Kevin Durant Kyrie was pretty bad in that Boston series, but like coming into the playoffs, he looked pretty good. I mean, he scored like 60 against Orlando late in the regular season. Like you felt pretty good about that team. Then they got there and they got it handed to them. I'm not convinced for absolute sure that, like, I think Mikal is important enough to keep you competitive too. Like I think it's just like if you're giving up Mikal at the cost of getting Kevin Durant, I think that takes your chances to win with Kevin Durant take a pretty big hit if you do that. Like, I'm not sure that that's like a no-brainer, we're winning the title type of team if you just get KD, but you have to give up your basically right now what's like your third and fourth best players.
Yeah, I
don't even know either. Hold on, let me say this too, because I'm not even sure that Mikal and Ayton are their third and fourth best players if we're projecting forward with Chris Paul. Like, what if next season's the year where Chris Paul finally has injuries and now your core is actually just Book, KD, and Cam Johnson? That's not a championship team. It's just not. Like, I want to be optimistic that they would get all these role players, but like that's a shell of a team. That hasn't worked in the NBA for a while.
No, but I also like just watched this team not be able to get a bucket, and before I knew it, the game was over. I just think you have a bucket getter like KD, and you can sit Booker whenever you need to. I just think staggering minutes. Like, we were holding on for dear life when Booker sat, when Chris Paul sat, and we're just trying to survive campaign and hoping for Aaron Holiday to save us. Like, I just think that staggering the minutes and having dudes that can get a bucket and you can sit your stars and you can keep a star on the floor would just work better. They got to do that with Harden. Like, I mean, he didn't like it that Kyrie wasn't playing, but KD got to sit, and then you got to have Harden play like a whole second by himself, or you got to let KD play a whole third quarter by himself while Harden sits. Like, I just think having that option just helps your team a lot more.
I mean, the best version of it was what Brooklyn looked like in the first round last year, right? Before they got hurt. And like,
yeah,
I think if Chris Paul stays fully healthy and Kevin Durant stays whatever fully healthy looks like for him at this point, a reduced regular season, but he's good for the playoffs, that team could be very, very, very good, no matter who's around them. But I just think being practical, it would require you nailing more than just the Kevin Durant trade. Like, I mentioned Landry Shamet, I mentioned Jay Crowder. We know Dario Saric is still there. We know Torrey Craig has actually a pretty big salary to make a trade. Like, you would have to really be smart and get good value on the rest of it. I don't think you can roll into a season just having those guys and feel like you're set up. I think you just need more. I think the NBA, it's becoming more of a depth league. Like, even the Clippers, they have like maybe the best fitting top two in the NBA. I know they haven't been healthy, but even they were like, no, we need depth. Like, every team is prioritizing that, whether they have great players or they don't have those great players yet. So I think
the Clippers got lucky with the confidence and just the shooting of Reggie Jackson. I think, yes, you got the buckets from Paul George and you got it from Kawhi, but you got lucky. Like, Reggie Jackson turned into a bucket getter and a third dude on the floor that's not coming off the bench. You just got three dudes that can get a shot as your starters that you kind of lucked into. And so now you can change your rotations to fit that. And we just didn't have that option.
I love how much you love shot makers.
Like, in the playoffs, you saw it. Yeah. They had the dude that could get a bucket, and we didn't have a single one. Yeah. Like, I just think when possessions get shorter and you get less of them, you need a dude that can get a shot or get fouled. And the team that had the dude that could do that ended up winning.
Yeah, I mean, it allows you to, like, you can play Jordan Poole, who can't do anything on defense because he can make a shot. Like, it does matter. And I think it's such a weird balance. Like, what the Clippers really got lucky with is they have an owner who will pay for any player that they need. And so they have Reggie Jackson, but then they also have Luke Kennard and Marcus Morris and Robert Covington and a million guys who every team would want. And that certainly helps too. But yeah, it'll be interesting. We'll obviously have no shortage on time to continue to talk about this stuff. The Suns also reportedly interested in Eric Gordon. Again, I talked about that a little bit earlier in the week.
Would have been nice a couple months ago.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I don't love it anymore, but I'm glad we're still flirting with the guy who would have changed our fortunes. I'm glad we still have the memory of him lurking in our minds. But yeah, let's move on to this front office stuff, because it doesn't just pertain to the draft. Yes, the draft is over, but haven't had a chance to talk too much about the hiring of this new assistant general manager either. So we'll dive into kind of how this all will play out over the course of the offseason. First, a quick word from BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered all year long with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Find the latest sports developments, including analysis, news, podcasts, all of it, including the Stanley Cup Final, the baseball regular season, fights, tennis, golf, all of it. F1 probably, if you're into that. BetOnline, your continued source for all of it, including live betting, esports odds, and more. So head to the website today. That's betonline.net, or use your mobile device to learn more about the latest trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so I don't have a great question for this one if we're kind of framing it in terms of key questions for the offseason, Aaron, but I guess what I wonder is how much, and this might sound like a dumb question, but as much as I think it's easy to kind of crap on James Jones, and some of the quotes were bonkers, I'll say that, but like, I do think he thinks about stuff differently. I think that there is some portion of it where you can't be so cynical, because this is a team that has been pretty solid when he's been here. And so thinking about things differently, attacking things differently, I don't think all of it's crazy. So maybe that's the question, is how much of it is him making up for the money that he doesn't have to spend, and how much of it is a genuine, like, outside the box type of GM? Where do you come down on that? Because I think that there's so many Suns fans right now who are just going completely overboard, acting like this guy's an idiot. And I'm like, okay, yeah, let's go that route. You're 25 on the internet. Let's chill out a little bit. You know what I mean?
No,
what do you think?
I think James Jones knows ball, and I think him and Monty, they're like on the same level. I think he's building the team that Monty wants. Like, I think Monty wants to play a certain brand of basketball, and maybe to an extent it's not as affordable as James Jones would like. But I think he actually is trying to build the teams that Monty can put out on the floor to run his system. I just think that a lot of stuff he did say was a little nuts, and he does seem a little like scared with the trigger every once in a while, especially for teams. I mean, he did make the Chris Paul trade, but Chris Paul wanted to come here, and it was pretty simple to make. Like, it wasn't that hard. OKC was doing whatever Chris Paul wanted because he helped them. So that one kind of landed on his lap. So when people treat it like this big, huge, game-changing thing that James Jones did, the decision was made for him for the most part. So I think that, like, a lot of the stuff that he did, like Booker, he got JaVale McGee here, it seems like. I just think that a lot of the stuff that James Jones has gotten credit for is just dudes being homies and trying to hook it up. Like, I'm not sure what he has actually done yet.
I will say, not to take, this is a crappy victory lap to take for somebody that hosts a Suns podcast, but I have to take it. I was the guy last year kind of being like, hold up, why is James Jones winning Executive of the Year? Like, I don't know. Sean Marks, I think, should have won Executive of the Year that James Jones won it. In my personal opinion, getting James Harden the way that they did, that team looked really, really good, and they were able to bring in some solid role players and keep Joe Harris and all that good stuff too. Doesn't really matter, but I guess my point is I've been questioning this stuff because I don't think that the stuff on the margins is very good. I don't think the investment in some of those smaller things, and like, it's not the best thing to talk about on a podcast and like get really granular about it, but like, I went through it yesterday. The best teams do all that stuff. Like, the best teams get Max Strus out of nowhere, right? Like, the best teams find what's that dude's name? BJ Boston, who's like everybody's favorite. He's on the Clippers, and he's like some second round pick that they drafted, and he's with Clutch, and now everybody's talking him up. Like, those are random examples, but the best teams do that stuff, and it matters. And the Suns have never done it. They've never cared to do it. And I just think that it is important. But I also think, like, I wonder what the version of it is where, like, what if James Jones worked for Steve Ballmer? You know, like, what happens if he can spend all the money? I think he would invest more. I don't think putting all that stuff on him is fair.
No, I think that he does work for Sarver, and I feel like that just takes a little bit of like awareness points for you if this is like a video game. Like, it's just hard to gauge how you can do your job when you're working for Sarver. Like, I know Steve Kerr, like, he had free range to do whatever he wanted, it seemed like, and he did some crazy stuff. But it just seems like every GM has to deal with the Sarver problem. But it doesn't seem like he's had, like, that much of, like, a reign on him. Like, I think that Sarver's given him a lot of power to do stuff other than, like, the Ayton thing. But I think everybody wanted to wait that out.
So do you think James Jones would, like, the size of the front office, I think, is one of the things you can really knock him on. And it's something he goes out of his way in that article to defend. Like, we keep it small on purpose. We want everybody to have a say. We want this and that. I think that look, I've never been a CEO or anything like that. I've never led an organization. But I get, like, that's not a crazy thing to say necessarily. But to a point, like, I went through and I did more research on this than I probably should have. And another thing I mentioned in yesterday's show is, like, if you go through the directory, the staff directory for the basketball operations for the Heat or the Raptors or the Clippers, some of these teams that have money, that use money, that invest, that nail some of the stuff on the margins, they have like 20, 30 people in their basketball operations department. And it doesn't look like it's hurting them. It doesn't feel like it's affecting them. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't get why you would go out of your way to say, yeah, we prefer like 4 people making big decisions. Like, how can you believe you got the best outcome? And this goes into the draft thing too, because part of the thing he talks about there is, like, we only want guys who we know are going to fit with what we do. It's like, well, how are you going to find those guys if you don't have the people to go do that? Like, how can you be sure that the one you identified as the best fit actually was the best fit, unless you're turning over every stone and actually, like, going out of your way to look at that stuff? That part I don't get. And I've knocked him for it for years, but, like, they didn't even replace Jeff Bauer. They had 2 assistant general managers under McDonough. Now they only have 1. They're about to hire another one. Like, that stuff, it's just like choosing not to invest where you easily could. There's no rules on any of that stuff. You can hire as many people as you want.
Yeah, that part doesn't make any sense to me, because I feel like if you go to Alabama, you get football, they probably have 12 dudes that makes decisions, and they have a dude that literally whose their job is to just pull Saban back. Like, I just think the hiring part is really weird with the Suns. Like, it has to just be a money thing or just a power thing with James Jones. I just don't see the issue with having more smarter minds in the building, especially since we don't have that great of a draft track record right now. And we've only just been able to make the layups that they've given us. But we, like you said, like, we haven't been able to sneak and get somebody that shockingly turned out to be good. Like, that's just never happened here.
Yeah, teams will go out and get an advisor. Like, the Clippers have Jerry West. The Heat have, he used to be there, Shane Battier. Even the Grizzlies brought back, like, Tayshaun Prince. Those are just guys who are around those organizations who you just pay a little bit of money to just bring them into the fold. Like, that stuff seems like a no-brainer to me. I know that there's maybe not a lot of ex-Suns that love the idea of coming back here.
I was going to say, we have to have dudes that want to come back home, and yeah. I just don't think we have any of those, like, at all, which is a lot to, like, in a really great world, Joe Johnson would be here and he'd be in the building and he'd get cheers and he'd convince free agents to come here, but we just don't got that team.
Yeah. I will say, on the positive, you mentioned this at the beginning in terms of, like, the system and the style and stuff. And I do think Jones does go out of his way. I think that the synchronization between him and Monty is, like, the single best thing going on in that department right now, because they've been on the same page forever. I think where they maybe don't have staff in basketball operations, I think that Monty has maybe a little bit more of a say in some of that stuff than other franchises might have their guys have. So I think that can be good in some situations, bad in other situations. I think it's probably been good for the Suns. So it's not all negative. I think obviously the Suns have won a lot, and yeah, it might have fallen in their lap that they got Chris Paul, but they got Chris Paul, and they did nail some stuff on the margins. Getting Dario Saric, that trade for Cam Johnson, like, did they luck out with Cam a little bit? Obviously, but they got Dario, who they were right to buy low on. He was playing awfully in Minnesota. He turned his career around here. Like, they've done good stuff. Aaron Baines, if you go back even further, stuff like that. Getting Ricky Rubio and knowing he would work here, like. They've done good stuff. They just have to continue to do it, and they can't, like, it's easy to make this stuff, claims about this stuff when you're winning, and then when you're losing, it gets really ugly. So I had one last tidbit, and I probably shouldn't have put this at the absolute end of a podcast. That's not great. But I happened to be at a conference this week for work where Morgan Cato, the new assistant general manager of the Suns, was speaking. And she had been scheduled to speak at this thing before I ever even knew who she was. And then like 2 days before it, it's like, oh, she's getting hired by the team that I cover. I was not able to meet her, which I hate myself for, but she skirted out right after her panel. So I didn't get to introduce myself and chat with her. But I did hear her talking at the thing, and she said she's not starting until August. So that's a little strange to me. I'm sure it was partially because the NBA still employs her and she had to get out of that. Maybe there was a contract she had to finish out or whatever it might have been. I don't know the exact circumstances around all of that. I think it's right to kind of be skeptical of like the timing of it. I mean, what did you make of all that stuff, knowing now that she's not even going to be here during free agency?
I think it's like pretty much all of us, we're waiting for the shoe to drop, and all of this stuff is going to make sense soon. I think like we've been saying it for months now, but I want all of this to make sense. And it just seems like until the big article or the Woj bomb or whatever happens, like I just think all of this stuff is going to seem weird until the Sarver thing clears everything up.
Yeah. I still feel like it's pretty dumb to not have this come out before free agency. I guess the Suns didn't end up doing anything in the draft last night, so the fact that it didn't come out before the draft didn't end up making a difference. If there was going to be any sort of punishment, it wouldn't have mattered last night for them. But they have to make big decisions coming up, and they just made one hiring this woman. Whether it was related to a punishment or not, I don't know. I don't want to cast that on her. I think she's super qualified. She seemed like a badass talking to her or seeing her up there, but I don't know. None of us know, but I wanted to mention that to close out the show. That'll do it for the week, guys. Special bonus episode for you. Apologies for the midweek departure. Had some technical difficulties. Brought all my equipment to a hotel, and then it didn't connect the right way. So appreciate your patience. Be back over the weekend if there's anything to talk about, but if not, absolutely on Monday. Enjoy your weekend. Now go make Locked On NBA your second listen to catch up on everything going on across the NBA headed toward free agency.